Direct from Montreal, Canada, this is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone from, we don't know, Dirty Shirley, Sweet and Lynch, Dokken, Lynch Mob, Ultraphonics, I don't know. It's guitarist George Lynch, and we love George, but my Lord, he has been in a ton of bands and projects over the years. It's hard to keep track, and luckily, I'm not collecting band shirts, because if I did, I'd have a closet full of different T-shirts with no band. So anyway, but we love George. I'm just kidding around. This, of course, is a Mitch Marathon month, the holiday edition, and I sort of just want to get right into the interview. But before we do that, let me just mention a couple of things. In early 2020, we've got some new albums coming out. We've got the new Thunder coming out. I believe it's going to be a March or April release. We do have that triple bill of two 70s bands and an 80s band that is going to announce a European, incorrect. They are going to announce an American tour in January, so keep your eyes peeled for that, another triple package, and it is bands that I love, so you will perhaps love it as well. We do have this Dokken Lynch Mob, Lita Ford. Now, yesterday, Doro was talking about a special project with Lita Ford. Today, we're talking about this tour. And I asked George about the tour. The tour's been announced. The artwork has been all over the internet. You know, Dokken reunion, Lynch Mob, Lita Ford, and the concept is Lynch Mob will do a set, Dokken will do a set with a new band, and of course the encores, probably the big songs, will be done with Don and George. And I asked George about it in the interview, and he went, I'm not so sure. We'll see. And it's like, but it's been announced. I'm not so sure. We'll see. So listen to his answer. It's interesting. See if you can pick up some details and see if you get a different sense as to what's going on from what I got. What else was I going to say? Oh, yeah, I was talking about upcoming new albums. Yes, the first quarter will also see, most likely, unless delayed, a new Bon Jovi album. I was in New York in November, had a nice chat with Obi O'Brien. The band was in town checking out final mixes of the album. So given the traditional setup, record company, print, blah, 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 marketing, you're probably looking at May 2020 for a new Bon Jovi, which is perfect because that usually leads you into the summer months of touring and so on and so forth. And it's nice to tour on the back of a new album. There's some other albums that are coming out that I know are coming out in March, April, May, and I'm just completely blanking on it. But guess what? It is Mitch Marathon month, the holiday edition, so I will be back tomorrow with another episode, and perhaps by then my brain will go, yes. Anyway, without further ado, here is a guitar hero, the one, the only, le seul et unique, George Lynch. We are speaking with the guitarist George Lynch. The latest album is Dirty Shirley, but there is also some great news in the world of Lynch Mob and Dokken. So let us say bonjour, as we say in Montreal, to the one, the only, George Lynch. Bonjour, George. How are you?
Oh, thank you. You're bilingual.
Of course. I'm in Montreal, so we have to be.
Oh, okay. Well, English is a second language.
Well, technically my third. I learned Danish first because my mom's Danish, but Danish, which I forgot now, and then French, and then English. Yeah, so no.
Dutch is a beautiful, beautiful language. It's I like it because it's not guttural at all, and there's not too many consonants.
No, in fact, a lot of the Scandinavian languages are nice because they speak English when they're around me, but
right. They have like 26 letter words that are almost all consonants and abbreviations for the word dog.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's really hard guttural language.
Yeah, they're I don't know how those languages develop. They're so incredibly obtuse, but okay. Let us get over to a Dirty Shirley. This is another project from Frontiers. You have been involved with many. Talk to me about the involvement with this one, and is it a band? Is it just a one-shot? How did it sort of come together?
Well, it's a project in the sense that, initially it's one album. That's what we're committed to, writing and recording, doing a couple of videos, doing some interviews, and in support of a record. And for that album cycle, the band is actually owned by the label, but I'm a key member, as is Dino. And then beyond that point, it really depends on the success of the band, the project, whether or not it moves forward. For instance, I did a project with Frontiers some years back called Sweet and Lynch with Michael Sweet. And that turned into a 2-album project with no touring. And I've done a number of those. And I enjoy doing them because it's a change of pace for me. Instead of being in the same band, doing the same record every year in and year out with the same guys, it makes life a little more interesting and broadens my horizons a little bit and challenges me, which I need.
Yeah, which is nice. Well, all right, let me get away from that one for a second, because there's another one that's been really good, and it's a great band. It's the one with Ray Luzier and Doug Pinnick, the KXM, and of course the latest album came out earlier this year, Circle of Dolls. Talk to me about that band, because that's the one where I feel it's not a project. This is the one where I feel we could be talking in 20 years from now, and it'll be like the 7th album, and the band. Talk to me about that one, because that one's from the heart, right? That's a really great one. You guys with Ray and Doug.
Yeah. All music is written from the heart, hopefully, and ideally. So there's no distinction in that sense between one project or another, whether it's Dokken stuff or stuff we wrote in the garage when we were kids, or one of these more current projects I'm doing. But the concept is different with KXM compared to, in comparison to the other projects, in that, as I've said many times and explained in many other interviews, we record our records on the spot. We compose on the spot in a period of about 2 weeks. And write a song, record it in the studio. No pre-meditation, no pre-production, no outside writing is allowed. So we just go in and we riff literally and figuratively off the top of our head and see what happens. And it always happens. So it's a wonderful chemistry, and it's a unique kind of project. And we haven't found any reason to stop doing it. So every 2 years we meet for 2 weeks and hang out and have a blast and watch the magic happen.
And it's great magic. All right, so there's a bunch of other projects that I'll get to eventually, from End Machine to Ultraphonics and stuff. But recently,
I gotta interject for a second, and I'm sorry to it's rude, but I do these interviews, and then I end up. There's so much ground to cover because I'm doing a lot of different projects.
That's right.
And it gets to the point of saturation, even for myself. So I got to imagine there's fatigue on the listener's end here. Listen, we don't want to hear about, what a genius you are in your 12 projects and how you can do everything, and I wonder about that, so, if I have an artist that I really love and care about their musical direction, I would be inundated if Jeff Beck came on, did an interview, and talked to me about 8 different projects he's involved in. I you know what I want to see? Jeff Beck and the Jeff Beck Group with Rod Stewart.
Right.
First 2 albums, or Wired, or whatever it is, So, and that's my own damn fault for, kind of not saying no to anything and doing all these projects because I can't, because I have the opportunity to, and it's fun for me. But it probably isn't the smartest thing in the world, business-wise, or on a lot of other levels. But, I don't know why I had to say that, but I just felt like, I needed to qualify all this for the listeners.
Well, in fact, I was actually going to sort of take the interview arc into that direction and get into branding, because when you talk about being in a band or in a brand, you know, people love George Lynch in Lynch Mob and people love George Lynch in Dokken. And I was going to ask you, did you spread yourself too thin? Is there a point where you damage the brand by being in so many different projects where people just go, "Ugh, he's on that too"? Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in that sense, it is damaging, and it isn't smart business at all. You know, it probably is better to be more economical with your output and make everything you put out. You know, make people wait for it, work it. You know, go out, tour every project, every record that you do in support of it, and that kind of thing. That's the way to do it. But you know, having said that, I did that for most of my adult life in my career. You know, I did all the, you know, annual album cycles with my one band, and did all the support. Took a little break, did it again, over and over and over again for decades. And I get to the point now in my life where I'm kind of getting off I have gotten off that wheel. You know, I'm just not going to be a slave to that anymore, because it's too confining, and I really want to enjoy what I'm doing. And I enjoy playing with other people and being challenged, because it helps me grow as not just a guitar player, but as a writer, as a composer, and as a person. So, and it's enjoyable. It's fun. You know, it's fun to mix it up and do different things, and keep my brain, you know, hopefully operating at a little bit higher level, so that I can produce better songs.
But you should be afforded that luxury at this point in your career. I mean, if this was 1985 or 1986 and you're trying to establish something, it would be like, oh, what is he doing? But by 2019, you've been on the wheel for 35 years. It's like, hey, if I want to do ultraphonics with the guy from Living Color, I'm going to do ultraphonics with the guy from Living Color. I mean, right? You've earned it.
And I'm telling you, a lot of times, you know, people may think, oh, he's just chasing the dollar. I go, well, that's probably, you know, a good percentage of these projects, definitely no dollar justification in it whatsoever. Project Infidelica would be one I'd name just off the top of my head. It's dollar negative for me. It was a lot of work, and I loved every minute of it. You know, and we actually toured in that project. That was the project before Ultraphonics with the singer from Fishbone and the bass player from War. And so you know, what you said is correct as far as my perspective, in that, you know, if I were in a gigantic, universally known, established band, of course it would be probably commercial suicide, you know, to change stylistically. You know, if you're AC/DC, nobody wants to hear AC/DC play reggae music or do anything other than what they do, or Van Halen or Judas Priest, or, you know, any of the big, gigantic established bands. But I'm not that. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword. You know, I'm not a household commodity, and I'm not a billionaire, but at the same time, that's afforded me the flexibility and the freedom to do what I want, and it has not pigeonholed me to a huge extent. In some people's eyes, it has, but you know.
I don't think you're pigeonholed, but all right. So let me ask you about then, you know, being in a huge established band like a Priest and like that. Do you think had the personalities worked out that you could have worked Dokken into that kind of band that could tour and do reunion shows and be part of stadium shows with Motley Crue in 29? Like, did you sort of look back at what happened in Dokken and go, if only?
Well, yeah, that's an old story. Absolutely. You know, Don, and I'm not saying this in any kind of, you know, accusatorial way or anything, or even in a negative way. It just is what it is. It's a decades old story now, and we've all gone on and been fine in our careers and so forth. But, you know, Don took a gamble and gambled that you know, he could disband the group and take off on his own and keep that momentum going that we had built over, roughly 10 years. And, to a large extent, that was misguided, and maybe we took a chance. The problem I had with that was that, the rest of the band suffered because of that, arguably in a lot of ways. So, but we had what we'd all worked for kind of, ripped out from under us when it came time for the big payoff, which we're at. There's a critical point in a band's career, at least in those days, where you kind of reach the event horizon, and it's a point of critical mass where when your record deal is up for renegotiation on a major label, and your sales have been accelerating and the band is on an upward trajectory, those two metrics are gold. That's where you want to be. And that's where your managers come in and you get paid. And you pretty much get established for the rest of your career or your life, as long as you don't completely screw everything up. And it's pretty hard to screw that up. So Motley had just gone through that. Anthrax, who was also on our label, went through that. Metallica, who was our manager, also managed them. Def Leppard. A lot of other bands we saw around that period of time were going through that, and we understood that. And so it was really a wonderful point in our careers. We were all looking forward to the renegotiation, and we were finally going to step up after, being an opening support act for 10 years, working hard on the road, working really hard on making better albums every single time out, and when we tripled our sales from our previous records by arguably writing better records and better sounding records, and also by supporting records by touring incessantly. And then when it came time for us to reap the rewards of that, it was pretty much stolen out from under us by one of us, one of our brothers, and that was very hard for me to take. And, so, it's one thing when it happens due to, let's say, an outside force, like,
company president or something, right?
Unscrupulous manager or something, or whatever. But this was from inside, and that was really painful. So, yeah, I think we would have. That's not that I think. I'm sure we would have, been more of a solid entity that could have withstood even, the decline in that kind of music's appeal through the next decade, and been just, sort of a commodity in rock, but doesn't do any good to think about that now. But having said that, there is some things happening next year, which I think are somewhat along those lines, that are going to sort of, put a little bit of Band-Aid on that shotgun wound for me.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that. Yesterday on the Dokken Facebook page, they put out a sort of a poster, if you want, and it says Dokken, Lynch Mob, reunion, Lita Ford. There's going to be obviously some kind of tour. Explain what kind of tour we're looking at, what the format we're looking at, and sort of how many dates are we looking at?
Well, listen, nothing's set in stone, so, I'm going to just preface this by saying that everything could fall apart tomorrow. And for who knows what reason, people have medical issues, I could have something come up, or, who knows what. But assuming that everything goes according to plan, there will be dozens of dates next year, if not many, many dozens. So, but that's hard to determine at this point. But right now, there's a good solid number on the books. But everything's tentative until it happens. So, no absolute certainty that things will happen. But at this point, they are happening. And what it is Lynch Mob would, open the show, play an hour or something, and then Dokken comes out, with Don's current band, and plays an hour and a half or whatever, and then I come out on my own and play with Don, play for like 3 or 4 songs at the end of the night
for the encores, which is very cool. Actually, I really like the concept. I think it's a great concept, and I'm looking forward to it. And hopefully, we can get it up to Canada and and maybe get a live album or something out of it. Does it lead to a recording of a new song or a new something just for the tour, or is it really we're just going to go do this tour and we'll see how it goes?
No new song or anything. I mean, we did that with the last thing that we recorded when we reformed a couple of years ago for those whatever it was, 6 shows or something.
Yeah, in Japan.
We did the live record, and we had a new bonus studio track. Another Day, I think it was called. And so no, there's no plans to do any recording. It wouldn't be actually any time right now because I'm finishing up a couple other records right now, including a Lynch Mob record that'll be out next year. So that's pretty good timing. Because Lynch Mob will have a new release in time for next year's touring.
And talk to me a little bit about that, because you've had Andrew Freeman who came in, you had Jimmy Danda. Are they part of the project or the album that's going to be released in 2020, or is it a Lynch Mob with a different group of people that are recording?
Well, Jimmy and I worked on the record initially, writing together as a team, and then I kind of, we came up with some really great, energetic, badass stuff, and then I sort of took everything and moved it into my studio and did my thing to it, and then we brought in Joe Retta, who's working on vocals as now. So the record is all written and recorded, except for the vocals, and so. But yeah, it's Jimmy's on the records, but Sean McNabb is not, and obviously a new vocalist. But Lynch Mob has been a revolving door now for many years. So the idea of having this brotherhood, this band of almost like family that people identify with the personalities and sort of grow with the band and feel like the band is like family and something they can depend on. I lost that a lot of years ago. I mean, with the initial breakup of the band back in the early 90s, and then, of course, many subsequent breakups when I had I made a lot of attempts at reconstructing the band in that way, where everybody felt invested and felt a sense of ownership and pride, and for some reason, which I still have never fully figured out, it was always the worst decision I could ever make was to try to pull that off, and I still cannot figure out why that always occurred. But every time I would try to put it together, in a business sense and so forth, where everybody was, an owner in the group, it would backfire on me, and the band would implode, usually in spectacular fashion and pretty quickly. So I'm not sure. So I got to the point where it has just been a revolving door, and I've not only actually had to accept that and learn to accept it, but actually embraced it and look at it genuinely like a good thing, because I look at it this way. When you have a legacy band, generally they kind of play the same songs. They have their hits that are 30 years old, like we do, or Dokken or Rat or anybody else. Great White, Quiet Riot, they go out and play the hits and everything else, and they try to play something new. Everybody hates it, of course. So having a revolving door actually gives us an opportunity to change things up and be a little more interesting to watch, and give you something to look forward to. So you go to see Lynch Mob and okay, maybe Robert Mason was singing last year, but this time you're coming and it's going to be Oni Logan, or it's going to be Andrew Freeman, or and who's going to be on drums? Oh, it's Brian Tichy. Next year, Brian Tichy's coming back. instead of Jimmy DeAnd. So that excites people, I think, sometimes, or at least keeps their interest perked. And so I don't look at it as a negative.
No, and also creatively, it's got to be interesting because you get this new energy from the players coming in. So I'm with you that I do see it as a positive. And you're right, fans do seem to enjoy the fact that they have their favorite Lynch Mob singer, they have their favorite Lynch Mob drummer, and of course, they're really there for you. Let's be straight up. You're the main attraction, right? You're the star if you want. So,
well, I mean, I have my job to do, and I do that. But I always felt Lynch Mob was really a band force. I mean, I'm not like Steve Vai, where you could have faceless guys back there. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's I think much more about the song and the total. And everybody else in the band, and they're always good players. I mean, you go see Lynch Mob, I mean, you're not going to see slouches. I mean, the singer is going to be great. The core band, the rhythm section is going to be real good and consistent. And we try. And the other thing about Lynch Mob is, and I've always tried to make sure that we have a bit of sort of like just shooting from the hip thing about us live, where we always try to make it like snowflakes. It's always, every show's different. We always have a jam section where we just kind of go off and literally go off, not like we have a planned thing, but really just completely free-form improvising. Like I just throw something out there, and a lot of nights, if I throw it out there, Jimmy will pick it up, and once Jimmy comes in, the train has left the station. We got to go. Everybody's got to pick up and see where it goes. And sometimes it falls apart, and sometimes it doesn't. But that's something unique to this band, I think. That we can sort of improvise and be spontaneous.
Yeah, it's great. And in fact, just yesterday I was talking to Frank Marino, and he was talking a little bit about the same stuff that they do with Mahogany Rush, about how they just go, I'm just going to play this riff and let's see who jumps on this train and let's see where it goes. And so it's interesting because he is, you have cited him as an influence before. So it's nice to see that kind of, Frank is great. He lives right down the street from me. We talk actually very, very often, and he's got a very interesting vibe when it comes to rehearsal and shows. It's really sort of loosey goosey. Anyway, it's great. I love that kind of, that spontaneity in music. I will finish.
And I think that's a product of the era that we grew up in, because that was a thing in the late '60s and the early '70s, and even into the mid '70s. That was, improvising was a thing. I mean, that you did just out of necessity, and I grew up with that, and so I value that, and I think it's. I've made this kind of sort of explained it this way before, but I sort of look at it like, for the audience, whether they're appreciating it or not, but they are experiencing the creative moment versus the recreative moment. So, for musicians, it was very exciting. One of the most exciting thing a musician can do is come up with the genesis of an idea, and then watch it grow into something. And if you can do that live, like Hendrix did, like Zeppelin did, like Cream did, and a lot of the bands that I grew up with and learned from, to me, that is really the core of what we do. It's how we write songs. It's how we started when we were in the garage, and when we're 15 years old. I mean, that's what it was. It was improvising. That's how we conceive of solos, and that's what's going on in our heads when we're imagining these things that we want to eventually turn into songs and records. They're all just jams in our head,
I agree.
Kind of an overlooked thing in rock and roll, I think, at least in this era.
Well, it is, and I'll tell you, as an older rock fan growing up, I used to collect bootlegs like you couldn't believe, because I liked listening to the different version of, the different version of this song and that song, because, in St. Louis they played it this way, but in Cleveland they played it that way. And I've stopped recently because when you get a live show, it's just, oh, it's the same freaking tape that they ran the night before. And it's like, ugh, really? Like, come on. It's the same 10 songs. They're played the exact same 10 ways. They got the keyboards and the backing vocals programmed. And it's like, but that's not what a live show is. A live show is what Lynch Mob does. It's what Frank Marino does. That's a live show, and that's what it should be. Yeah. But, yeah, So, by the way, kudos to you for keeping it live, by the way. You're one of the rare breed, unfortunately, these days. You should not be the rare breed. You should be just like everybody else, where everybody comes and plays a live show, not this pre-taped, pre-triggered, yuck.
It's hard to not fall prey to, I mean, it's such a, it's when you see another band and they sound perfect and they sound like an album, it makes you question your own abilities and your own performance, because you're like, well, maybe our sloppiness is not a good thing. These guys are coming out and they sound like a machine, and played with lots of bands like that, and it can be intimidating. So there is, but then you go see the real thing, and you listen to Bob Marley or real music, real bands, Rage or something. They're just doing it. And then, okay, this is what it's about. It's just Tom Petty. It's just music. ZZ Top. It's just real music.
Yes, that's what it is. And I'm telling you, if Frank Marino rolls into your town, give me a call. I'll get you on the guest list, and you'll go check it out, and you will have the time of your life, because that's what the live experience is supposed to be. It's supposed to be live.
I saw Frank and Marino on Mahogany Rush, and I can't remember exactly the year. I was going to say 76. That might be way off. Open up for Queen, Sheer Heart Attack tour at a venue in San Francisco, Fillmore, I believe, Fillmore West. And I talked to Frank about that show. And I remember, I was so excited to see him, and I'm a huge fan, as is Zakk Wylde, by the way, and a lot of other people.
Felt
that for him. And I could tell he wasn't having the best show, and I actually asked him about that, and he said he remembers that show specifically, and pretty much hated the whole tour, but that show in particular, because they just sandbagged him so badly. And sandbag. Most people, I'm sure, understand what sandbagging is, but in case you don't,
sabotaged him. Where did you say that was? What city? San Francisco?
San Francisco, Fillmore West. Sheer Heart Attack tour.
I am looking it up. We have March 30th, 1975 in San Francisco, and it's Mahogany Rush and Queen. There you go, 1975. Yeah. Wow.
I was there. Yep.
What a tour. That must have been epic. I mean, that was really sort of the beginning of Queen, in a sense. They were, oh, well, hey, look at that.
I mean, they had the first two records, like the Ogre Battle records with Queen 1 and 2, which were a little different stylistically. They were still in their formative stages. They hadn't really developed into what we know of, them as now. But Sheer Heart Attack was they'd really come into themselves. That was just a wall-to-wall, incredible, magnificent record. And I saw them right at their peak. I mean, it was unbelievable, really unbelievable. But I felt bad for Frank, and I was, because I could tell he could do it, and he wanted to do it, but he was so in the dark on stage. I could barely see him. He gave no sound check the whole tour. They sandbagged his sound and his lights and his stage room, and it's demoralizing, And
terrible.
I did remember one thing, just as a gear guy, because I'm just all about the amps, everything. Whenever I go to a concert, all I care about is the gear. I look at everything, and he had one of everything on stage, which was always kind of stuck with me. The Marshall and a high watt and another amp and another amp and another, all these stacks, and it was just phenomenal. And he's like one of my original, I'm really a student of every guitar player, but I mean, he was one of the big ones too for me. And I mean, he did have that Hendrix thing going on, kind of a white Hendrix, but
a little bit like Uli Jon Roth with that Hendrix thing, but yeah,
he's the Canadian white Hendrix,
right. And he's got this new live DVD, Live at the Agora, which is 6 hours long. If you haven't picked it up, you definitely got to get it, because it is spectacular. It's like ooh. And he was telling me yesterday, well, we did a 12-hour concert and I had to whittle it down to 6 hours. And I'm like, a 12-hour like what? What are you talking about?
There is such a thing?
Yeah, apparently he just got into a groove with his band and they just started playing, and a jam led to another jam, and 12 hours later the show was over. And I'm like, 12 hours? 12 hours? Don't you have to pee?
Well, that's why God invented Pampers, I guess. I don't know.
I know. And by the way, since we're talking sheer heart attack, right, maybe we can work up a version of Stone Cold Crazy for the next Lynch Mob 2 to celebrate all of this coming together. But George, always a pleasure, by the way. And I know we've talked about how you sort of spread yourself with different bands, but I got to say, they've always been quality. The KMX stuff is great, and the End Machine album, which I know is probably just a project you're just going to do one off, but just to hear you with Jeff and Mick and Robert Mason, who's just a vocal god, of course, been in Lynch Mob too. That was a really great album. So I'm glad you guys did it. It was a nice sort of bow to all the eras and all the bands, and sort of tied all together. So good on you for that.
Well, then I'll just keep doing that then, since you like it so much.
Yeah, there you go. And hopefully the Lynch Mob Dokken Lita Ford tour or a version of will get up here to Canada. And on that, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. A great pleasure as always.
Thank you, and I appreciate the French lesson.
Anytime.
Okay.
I will give your best to Frank when I call him later. Cheers.
Do that, please. Thank you.
Merci.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Talk soon. All right.
This has been Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. For more exclusive content and interviews, subscribe on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and many more. Follow Mitch on all the socials, especially Twitter, @Mitch Lafon, and on Instagram, @Mitch_Lafon. Get your Mitch merch now at loudtracks.com/Mitch.